Hey everyone, today we're reading Joshua chapters 9 to 16. We just did a Joshua video yesterday. The reason I'm doing another one is because we didn't do one yesterday, and I was meant to do one, but I wasn't feeling really good, so I just went to sleep and didn't do one. I was a little sick, I was really tired. But I won't be doing one tomorrow either, so hopefully this will also fill the gap. We are doing 8 chapters of videos, so it's quite a lot, to be honest. I mean, it's not that much. I love reading a lot, like you have no idea. I have just a love for reading abundant amount of the Bible at once. I don't know why. There's a lot to take in. There's a lot to understand, but it's just wonderful to read a bunch at once. And last year I was trying to read all the Bible in a year, and I had like 2 months to do so. And I read Joshua in one day in like maybe an hour and 50 minutes, and then I stayed up all night reading Numbers, and that was exhausting. I was really tired the next day because all I did was just stay up reading Numbers, and the book that took me the longest was Second Chronicles, because I don't know why it took me the longest. It's pretty big, to be honest. Second Chronicles is like 30 something chapters, I think. Let's fact check that. It's like it's really long. I know that though. It's not a small book. It's not like Psalms big. Last chapter of the Bible I read though, before I finished the entirety of it, was Psalms 119. Yeah, Second Chronicles is quite the book. 36 chapters. Yeah, it's big. Nothing compared to Psalms though. Psalms is huge. I think Jeremiah is the biggest book in word count, and Psalms the biggest book in chapter count. I'm unsure though. I would have to shush it up. I've shushed it up before, and that's what I've seen now. I don't know. But like I said, I love reading an abundant amount of the Bible a day. I think it's good to like fill your entire day with God. I mean, it's obviously good to fill your entire day with God. Sometimes it's hard to do that for some people. Sometimes it's easier for others. Sometimes I struggle as well, because we're all sinners. We all struggle with our own sins and stuff. But good thing, whenever you surround yourself with God, that sin is burned away and you are forgiven because of the blood of Christ. But now we're going to get right into it. Alright, chapter 9. He's going to start attacking the southern kings, and the sun's going to stand still in chapter 10. That's going to be crazy. That's one of my favorite parts of Joshua. Okay, so here we go. Now when all the kings west of the Jordan heard about these things, the kings in the hill country and the western foothills and along the entire coast of the Mediterranean Sea as far as Lebanon, the king of the Hittites and Moabites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, they came together to wage war against Joshua and Israel. However, when the people of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they resorted to a ruse. They went as a delegation whose donkeys were loaded with worn-out sacks and old wineskins, cracked and mended. They put worn and patched sandals on their feet and wore old clothes. All the bread of their food supply was dry and moldy. Then they went to Joshua in the camp of Gilgal and said to him and the Israelites, "We have come from a distant country, make a treaty with us." The Israelites said to the Hivites, "But perhaps you live near us, so how can we make a treaty with you?" "We are your servants," they said to Joshua. When Joshua asked, "Who are you and where do you come from?" They answered, "Your servants have come from a very distant country because of the fame of the Lord your God, for we have heard reports of him, all that he did in Egypt, and all that he did to the 2 kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, Sihon king of Heshbon and Og king of Bashan, who reigned in Ashtaroth. And our elders and all those living in our country said to us, 'Take provisions for your journey, go and meet them and say to them, we are your servants, and make a treaty with us. This bread of ours was warm when we packed it at home on the day we left to come to you, but now see how dry and moldy it is. And these wineskins that we filled were new, but see how cracked they are, and our clothes and sandals are worn out by the very long journey.' The Israelites sampled their provisions, but did not inquire of the Lord. Then Joshua made a treaty of peace with them to let them live, and the leaders of the assembly ratified it by oath. 3 days after they made the treaty with the Gibeonites, the Israelites heard that they were neighbors living near them. So the Israelites set out, and on the 3rd day came to their cities, Gibeon, Kephirah, Beeroth, and Kiriath-Jearim. But the Israelites did not attack them because the leaders of the assembly had sworn an oath to them by the Lord, the God of Israel. The whole assembly grumbled against the leaders, but all the leaders answered, "We have given them our oath by the Lord, the God of Israel, and we cannot touch them now. This is what we will do to them. We will let them live, so that God's wrath will not fall on us for breaking the oath we swore to them." They continued, Let them live, but let them be woodcutters and water carriers in the service of the whole assembly. So the leader's promise to them was kept. Then Joshua summoned the Gibeonites and said, Why did you deceive us by saying we live a long way from you, while actually you live near us? You are now under a curse. You will never be released from service as woodcutters and water carriers for the house of my God. They answered Joshua, Your servants were clearly told how the Lord your God has commanded his servant Moses to give you the whole land and to wipe out all its inhabitants from before you. So we feared for our lives because of you, and that is why we did this. We are now in your hands. Do to us whatever seems good and right to you. So Joshua saved them from the Israelites, and they did not kill them. That day he made the Gibeonites woodcutters and water carriers for the assembly to provide for the needs of the altar of the Lord at the place the Lord would choose, and that is what they are to this day. Now Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, heard that Joshua had taken Ai and totally destroyed it, doing to Ai and its king as he had done to Jericho and its king, and that the people of Gibeon had made a treaty of peace with Israel and had become their allies. He and his people were very much alarmed at this because Gibeon was an important city, like one of the royal cities. It was larger than Ai, and all its men were good fighters. So Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, appealed to Hoham, king of Hebron, Hiram, king of Jarmuth, Japhi, king of Lachish, and Debir, king of Eglon. Come up and help me attack Gibeon, he said, because it has made peace with Joshua and the Israelites. Then the 5 kings, king of the Amorites, the kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon, joined forces. They moved up with all their troops and took up positions against Gibeon and attacked it. The Gibeonites sent word to Joshua in the camp of Gilgal, Do not abandon your servants. Come up to us quickly and save us. Help us, because all the Amorite kings from the hill country have joined forces against us. So Joshua marched up from Gilgal with his entire army, including all the best fighting men. The Lord said to Joshua, Do not be afraid of them. I have given them into your hand. Not one of them will be able to withstand you. After an all-night march from Gilgal, Joshua took them by surprise. The Lord threw them into confusion before Israel. So Joshua and the Israelites defeated them completely at Gibeon. Israel pursued them along the road going up to Beth Horon and cut them down all the way to Azekah and Makkedah. As they fled before Israel on the road down from Beth Horon to Azekah, the Lord hurled large hailstones down on them, and more of them died from the hail than were killed by the swords of the Israelites. On the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel, Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and you, moon, over the valley of Ajalon. So the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, till the nation avenged itself on its enemies, as it is written in the book of Jashar. The sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down about a full day. There has never been a day like it before or since, a day when the Lord listened to a human being. Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel. Then Joshua returned with all Israel to the camp at Gilgal. Now the 5 kings had fled and hidden in the cave at Makkedah. When Joshua was told that the 5 kings had been found hiding in the cave at Makkedah, he said, Roll large rocks up to the mouth of the cave and post some men there to guard it. But don't stop. Pursue your enemies, attack them from the rear, and don't let them reach their cities, for the Lord your God has given them into your hand. So Joshua and the Israelites defeated them completely, but a few survivors managed to reach their fortified cities. The whole army then returned safely to Joshua in the camp at Makkedah, and no one uttered a word against the Israelites. Joshua said, Open the mouths of the cave, and bring those 5 kings out to me. So they brought the 5 kings out of the cave, the kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon. When they had brought these kings to Joshua, he summoned all the men of Israel and said to the army commanders who had come with him, Come here and put your feet on the necks of these kings. So they came forward and placed their feet on their necks. Joshua said to them, Do not be afraid, do not be discouraged, be strong and courageous. This is what the Lord will do to all the enemies you are going to fight. Then Joshua put the kings to death and exposed their bodies on 5 poles, and they were left hanging on the poles until evening. At sunset, Joshua gave the order, and they took them down from the poles and threw them into the cave where they had been hiding. At the mouth of the cave, they placed large rocks, which are there to this day. That day, Joshua took Makkedah. He put the city and its king to the sword and totally destroyed everyone in it. He left no survivors. And he did to the king of Makkedah as he had done to the king of Jericho. Then Joshua and all Israel with him moved on from Makkedah to Libnah and attacked it. The Lord also gave that city and its king into Israel's hand. The city and everyone in it Joshua put to the sword. He left no survivors there, and he did to its king as he had done to the king of Jericho. Then Joshua and all Israel with him moved on from Libnah to Lachish. He took up positions against it and attacked it. The Lord gave Lachish into Israel's hands, and Joshua took it on the second day. The city and everyone in it he put to the sword, just as he had done to Libnah. Meanwhile, Horam, king of Gezer, had come up to help Lachish, but Joshua defeated him and his army until no survivors were left. Then Joshua and all Israel were with him moved on from Lachish to Eglon. They took up positions against it and attacked it. They captured it that same day and put it to the sword and totally destroyed everyone in it, just as they had done to Lachish. Then Joshua and all Israel with him went up from Eglon to Hebron and attacked it. They took the city and put it to the sword together with its kings, its villages, and everyone in it. They left no survivors, just as at Eglon they totally destroyed it and everyone in it. Then Joshua and all Israel with him turned around and attacked Debir. They took the city, its king, and its villages, and put them to the sword. Everyone in it they totally destroyed. They left no survivors. They did to Debir and its king as they had done to Libnah and its king and to Hebron. So Joshua subdued the whole region, including the hill country, the Negev, the western foothills, and the mountain slopes. Together with all their kings, he left no survivors. He totally destroyed all who breathed, just as the Lord, the God of Israel, had commanded. Joshua subdued them from Kadesh Barnea to Gaza, and from the whole region of Goshen to Gibeon. All these kings and their leaders and their lands Joshua conquered in one campaign, because the Lord, the God of Israel, fought for Israel. Then Joshua returned with all Israel to the camp at Gilgal. Well, he did conquer the leaders, I guess. I just wasn't reading it correctly. Chapter 11. When Jabin, king of Hazor, heard of this, he sent word to Jobab, king of Madon, to the kings of Shimron and Akshaph, and to the northern kings who were in the mountains and the Arabah south of Kinnereth, and the foothills, not in the foothills, in the western foothills, and in Naphtaph Dor on the west, to the Canaanites in the east and west, to the Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, and Jebusites in the hill country, and to the Hivites below Hermon in the region of Mizpah. They came out with all their troops and a large number of horses and chariots, a huge army as numerous as the sand on the seashore. All these kings joined forces and made camp together at the waters of Merom to fight against Israel. The Lord said to Joshua, "Do not be afraid of them, because by this time tomorrow I will hand all of them, slain, over to Israel. You are to hamstring their horses and burn their chariots." So Joshua and his whole army came against them suddenly at the waters of Merom and attacked them, and the Lord gave them into the hand of Israel. They defeated them and pursued them all the way to Greater Sidon, to Misrephoth-Maim, into the valley of Mizpah on the east until no survivors were left. Joshua did to them as the Lord had directed. He hamstrung their horses and burned their chariots. At that time Joshua turned back and captured Hazor and put its king to the sword. Hazor had been the head of all these kingdoms. Everyone in it they put to the sword. They totally destroyed them, not sparing anyone that breathed, and he burned Hazor itself. Joshua took all these royal cities and their kings and put them to the sword. He totally destroyed them, as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded. Yet Israel did not burn any of the cities built on their mounds, except Hazor, which Joshua burned. The Israelites carried off for themselves all the plunder and livestock of these cities, but all the people they put to the sword until they completely destroyed them, not sparing anyone that breathed, as the Lord commanded his servant Moses. So Moses commanded Joshua, and Joshua did it. He left nothing undone of all that the Lord commanded Moses. So Joshua took this entire land, the hill country, all the Negev, the whole region of Goshen, the western foothills, Arabah, and the mountains of Israel with their foothills, from Mount Halak, which rises towards Seir, to Baal-Gad in the valley of Lebanon, below Mount Hermon. He captured all their kings and put them to death. Joshua waged war against all these kings for a long time, except for the Hivites living in Gibeon. Not one city made a treaty of peace with the Israelites, who took them all in battle. For it was the Lord himself who hardened their hearts to wage war against Israel, so that he might destroy them totally, exterminating them without mercy, as the Lord had commanded Moses. All that time Joshua went and destroyed the Anakites from the hill country, from Hebron, Debir, and Anab, from all the hill country of Judah, and from all the hill country of Israel. Joshua totally destroyed them and their towns. No Anakites were left in Israelite territory. Only in Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod did any survive. So Joshua took the entire land, just as the Lord had directed Moses, and he gave it as an inheritance to Israel according to their tribal divisions. Then the land had rest from war. Hold on, I'm going to reread something real quick. Okay. Alright. These are the kings of the land whom the Israelites had defeated and whose territory they took over east of the Jordan from the Arnon Gorge to Mount Hermon, including on the eastern sides of the Arabah. Sihon, king of the Amorites, who reigned in Heshbon, he ruled over Aria on the rim of the Arnon Gorge, from the middle of the gorge to the Jabbok River, which is the border of the Ammonites. This included half of Galilee. He also ruled over the eastern Arabah from the Sea of Galilee to the Sea of the Arabah, that is the Dead Sea, to Beth Jeshemoth, and then southward below the slopes of Pisgah, and the territory of Og, king of Bashan, one of the last of the Rephites, who reigned in Ashtaroth and Edrei. He ruled over Mount Hermon, Salakah, and of Bashan to the border of the people of Geshir and Makkah, and half of Galilee to the border of Sihon, king of Heshbon. Moses, the servant of the Lord, and the Israelites conquered them, and Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave the land to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh to be their possession. Here is a list of the kings of the land that Joshua and the Israelites conquered on the west side of the Jordan, from Baal-Gad in the valley of Lebanon to Mount Halak, which rises towards Seir. Joshua gave their lands as an inheritance to the tribes of Israel, according to their tribal divisions. The lands included the hill country, the western foothills, the Arabah, the mountain slopes, the wilderness, and the Negev. These were the lands of the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. These were the kings: the king of Jericho, 1; the king of Ai near Bethel, 1; the king of Jerusalem, 1; the king of Hebron, 1; the king of Jarmuth, 1; the king of Lachish, 1; the king of Eglon, 1; the king of Gezer, 1; the king of Debir, 1; the king of Geder, 1; the king of Hormah, 1; the king of Adrad, 1; the king of Lebnah, 1; the king of Adullam, 1; the king of Makkedah, 1; the king of Bethel, 1; the king of Tappuah, 1; the king of Hephir, 1; the king of Aphik, 1; the king of Lasharan, 1; the king of Madon, 1; the king of Hazor, 1; the king of Shimron Meren, 1; the king of Akshaph, 1; the king of Tanakh, 1; the king of Megiddo, 1; the king of Kadesh, 1; the king of Joachim in Carmel, 1; the king of Dor and Naphath Dor, that's 1; the king of Goyim and Gilgal, 1; the king of Tezrah, 1; 31 kings in all. When Joshua had grown old, the Lord said to him, "You are now very old, and there are still very large areas of land to be taken over. This is the land that remains, all the regions of the Philistines and Geshurites from the Shihor River, on the east of Egypt to the territory of Ekron, on the north all of it counted as Canaanite, though held by the 5 Philistine rulers, in Gaza, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Gath, and Ekron. The territory of the Avites on the south, all the land of the Canaanites from Arah, of the Sidonians, as far as Aphik, and the border of the Amorites, the area of Byblos, and all Lebanon to the east, from Baal-Gad below Mount Hermon to Lebo Hamath. As for all the inhabitants of the mountains regions, from Lebanon to Misrephoth Maim, that is all the Sidonians, I myself will drive them out before the Israelites. Be sure to allocate this land to Israel for an inheritance, as I have instructed you, and divide it as an inheritance among the 9 tribes and half of the tribe of Manasseh. The other half of Manasseh, the Reubenites and the Gadites, had received the inheritance that Moses had given them east of the Jordan, as he, the servant of the Lord, had assigned it to them. It extended from Aria on the rim of the Arnon Gorge, and from the town in the middle of the gorge, and included the whole plateau of Midabah as far as Dibon, and all the towns of Sihon, king of the Amorites, who ruled in Heshbon, out to the border of the Ammonites. It also included Galilee, the territory of the people of Geshir and Makkah, all of Mount Hermon, all Bashan as far as Salakah, that is the whole kingdom of Og and Bashan, who had reigned in Ashtaroth and Edrei. He was the last of the Rephites. Moses had defeated them and taken over the land, but the Israelites did not drive out the people of Geshir and Makkah, so they continued to live among the Israelites to this day. But to the tribe of Levi he gave no inheritance, since the food offerings presented to the Lord, the God of Israel, are their inheritance as he promised them. This is what Moses had given to the tribe of Reuben according to its clans. The territory from Aria on the rim of the Arnon Gorge, and from the town in the middle of the gorge, and the whole plateau against Midabah, past Midabah, to Heshbon, and all its town on the plateau, included Dibon, Bamath Baal, Beth Baal Meon, Jahaz, Kedemoth, Mephath, Kiriathaim, Sibmah, Zerith, Shahar, on the hill in the valley, Beth Peor, the slopes of Pisgah, and Beth Jeshemoth. All the towns on the plateau and the entire realm of Sihon, king of the Amorites, who ruled at Heshbon, Moses has defeated him and the Midianite chiefs, Evi, Rakim, Zerahir, and Reba, princes allied with Sihon, who lived in that country. In addition to those slain in battle, the Israelites had put to the sword Balaam, son of Beer, who practiced divination. The boundary of the Reubenites was the blank of the Jordan. These towns and their villages were the inheritance of the Reubenites according to their clans. This is what Moses had given to the tribe of Gad according to its clans. The territory of Jazer, all the towns of Galilee, and half the Ammonite country as far as Aria near Rabbah, and from Heshbon to Ramath Mizpah and Betonim, and from Mahanaim to the territory of Debir, and in the valley Beth Hadram, Beth Nimrah, Succoth, and Zaphon, with the rest of the realm of Sihon, king of Heshbon, the east of the Jordan, the territory up to the end of the Sea of Galilee. These towns and their villages were the inheritance of the Gadites according to their clans. This is what Moses had given to the half-tribe of Manasseh, that is, to half the family of the descendants of Manasseh according to his clans. The territory extending from Mahanaim and including all of Bashan, the entire realm of Og, king of Bashan, all the settlements of Jair and Bashan, 60 towns, half of Galilee, and Ashtaroth and Edrei, the royal cities of Og and Bashan. This was for the descendants of Machir, son of Manasseh, for half of the sons of Machir according to their clans. This is the inheritance Moses had given when he was in the plains of Moab across the Jordan east of Jericho. But to the tribe of Levi, Moses had given no inheritance. The Lord, the God of Israel, is their inheritance as he promised them. Now these are the areas the Israelites received as inheritance in the land of Canaan, which Eleazar the priest, Joshua son of Nun, and the heads of the tribal clans of Israel allotted to them. Their inheritances were assigned by lot to the 9.5 tribes, as the Lord had commanded through Moses. Moses had granted the 2.5 tribes their inheritance east of the Jordan, but had not granted the Levites an inheritance among the rest. For Joseph's descendants had become 2 tribes, Manasseh and Ephraim. The Levites received no share of the land, but only 2 to live in with pasture lands for their flocks and herds. So the Israelites divided the land just as the Lord had commanded Moses. Now the people of Judah approached Joshua at Gilgal, and Caleb son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, said to him, "You know what the Lord said to Moses, the man of God, at Kadesh Barnea, about you and me. I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to explore the land, and I brought him back a report according to my convictions. But my fellow Israelites who went up with me made the hearts of the people melt in fear. I, however, followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. So on that day Moses swore to me, the land on which your feet have walked will be your inheritance and that of your children forever, because you have followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. Now then, just as the Lord promised, he has kept me alive for 40 years since the time he said this to Moses, while Israel moved about in the wilderness. So here I am today, 85 years old. I am still as strong today as the day Moses sent me out. I'm just as vigorous to go out to battle now as I was then. Now give me this hill country that the Lord promised me that day. You yourself heard that then that the Anakites were there, and their cities were large and fortified. But the Lord helping me, I will drive them out, as he said." Then Joshua blessed Caleb son of Jephunneh, and gave him Hebron as his inheritance. So Hebron has belonged to Caleb son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite ever since, because he followed the Lord, the God of Israel, wholeheartedly. Hebron used to be called Kiriath Arba, after Arba, who was the greatest man among the Anakites. Then the land had rest from war. Getting a cough drop. The allotment for the tribe of Judah, the big boy tribe, according to its clans, extended down to the territory of Edom, to the desert of Zin, and the extreme south. Their southern boundary started from the bay at the southern end of the Dead Sea, crossed south at Scorpion Pass, continued onto Zin, and it went over to the south of Kadesh Barnea. Hold on, I'll be right back. verse 2 of chapter 15, I guess. Their southern boundary started from the bay at the southern end of the Dead Sea, crossed south of Scorpion Pass, continued on to Zin, and went over to the south of Kadesh Barnea. Then it ran past Hezron, up to Adar, and curved around to Karka. It then passed along to Asmon and joined the Wadi of Egypt, ending at the Mediterranean Sea. That is their southern boundary. The eastern boundary is the Dead Sea as far as the mouth of the Jordan. The northern boundary started from the bay of the sea at the mouth of the Jordan, went up to Beth Haglah, and continued north of Beth Arabah to the stone of Balhon, son of Reuben. The boundary then went up to Debir from the valley of Acre and turned north to Gilgal, which faces the pass of Admullen, south of the gorge. It continued along to the waters of En Shemish and came out at En Rajil. Then it ran up to the valley of Ben Hinnom, along the southern slope of the Jebusite city, that is Jerusalem. From there it climbed to the top of the hill west of the Hinnom Valley, at the northern end of the valley of Ephraim. From the hilltop, the boundary headed toward the spring of the waters of Nephtoah, came out at the towns of Mount Ephron, and went down toward Bala, that is Kiriath Jearim. Then it curved westward from Bala to Mount Seir, ran along the northern slope of Mount Jearim, that is Kesalon, continued down to Beth Shemesh, and crossed to Timnah. It went out to the northern slope of Ekron, turned toward Shikharan, passed along to Mount Bala, and reached Jabneel. The boundary ended at the sea. The western boundary is the coastline of the Mediterranean Sea. These are the boundaries around the people of Judah by their clans. In accordance with the Lord's command to him, Joshua gave to Caleb, son of Jephunneh, a portion in Judah. Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron. Arba was the forefather of Anak. From Hebron, Caleb drove out the three Anakites, Shishai, Ahimam, and Talmai, the sons of Anak. From there he marched against the people living in Debir, formerly called Kiriath Sephir, and Caleb said, I will give my daughter Aksah in marriage to the man who attacks and captures Kiriath Sephir. Othniel, son of Kenaz, Caleb's brother, took it, so Caleb gave his daughter Aksah to him in marriage. One day when she came to Othniel, she urged him to ask her father for a field, and she got off her donkey. Caleb asked her, What can I do for you? She replied, Do me a special favor. Since you have given me land in the Negev, give me also springs of water. So Caleb gave her the upper and lower springs. This is the inhabitants of the tribe of Judah according to its clans. The southernmost towns of the tribe of Judah in the Negev toward the boundary of Edom were Kabzeel, Eder, Jagir, Kenah, Demonah, Adadah, Kadesh, Hazir, Ethnan, Ziph, Talim, Belath, Hazar, Hadattah, Kiriath Hezron, that is Hazar, Ammon, Shema, Moladah, Hazir, Gada, Heshmon, Beth Palet, Hazashel, Beersheba, Beziotiah, Bala, Iyam, Ezim, Otolad, Kesil, Hormah, Ziklag, Madmenah, Sansana, Lebaoth, Shilhim, Ain, and Rimmon, a total of 29 towns and their villages. I felt like I was speaking a whole different language just then. In the western foothills, Eshtal, Zorah, Ashram, Zanoah, En-Ganim, Tapua, Enim, Jarmuth, Adulam, Sokar, Azkiah, Sharvaim, Adathaim, and Gedera, or Gederathaim, 14 towns and their villages. Zanian, Hadashah, Middalgad, Dalian, Mizpah, Joktheel, Lachish, Bozkath, Eglon, Kaban, Lamas, Kitlish, Gederath, Beth Dagon, Namah, and Makkedah, 16 towns and their villages. Libnah, Ether, Ashan, Iftah, Ashna, Nezib, Kilea, Agzib, and Miasha, 9 towns and their villages. Ekron with its surrounding settlements and villages west of Ekron, all that were in the vicinity of Ashdod, together with their villages, Ashdod, its surrounding settlements and villages, and Gaza, its settlements and villages, as far as the Wadi of Egypt and the coastline of the Mediterranean Sea. In the hill country, Shamir, Jatir, Sokah, Danah, Kiriath Sanah, that is Debir, Anab, Eshtama, Anim, Goshen, Holan, and Gilo, 11 towns and their villages, Aram, Duma, Eshin, Janim, Beth Tupua, Beth Tupua, Afka, Humta, Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, and Zair, 9 towns and their villages. Maon, Carmel, Ziph, Juta, Jezreel, Jokdeam, Zanoah, Cain, Gibeah, and Timnah, 10 towns and their villages. Hahu, Bethzur, Gedir, Madrath, Ben Anath, and Elkan, 6 towns and their villages. Kiriath Baal, that is Kiriath Jearim, and Rabbah, 2 towns and their villages. In the wilderness, Beth Arabah, Midland, Sekemah, Ibshan, the city of Salt, and En Gadi, 6 towns and their villages. Judah could not dislodge the Jebusites who were living in Jerusalem to this day. The Jebusites lived there with the people of Judah. The allotment for Joseph began at the Jordan, east of the springs of Jericho, and went up from there through the desert into the hill country of Bethel. It went on from Bethel, that is Luz, crossed over to the territory of the Arkites, and Atarath, descended westward to the territory of the Japheletites, as far as the region of Lower Beth Zoran and onto Giza, ending at the Mediterranean Sea. So, Manasseh and Ephraim, the descendants of Joseph, received their inheritance. This was the territory of Ephraim according to its clans. The boundary of their inheritance went from Atarath Adir in the east to upper Beth Hedron and continued to the Mediterranean Sea from Mikmethath on the north. It curved eastward to Tanath Shiloh, passing by it to Janoah on the east. Then it went down from Janoah to Atarath and Narad, touched Jericho, and came out at the Jordan. From Tapua, the border went west to Canaan Ravine. No, wait, let me rephrase that. Verse 8. From Tapua, the border went west to the Canaan Ravine and ended at the Mediterranean Sea. This was the inheritance of the tribe of the Ephraimites according to its clans. It also included all the towns and their villages that were set aside for the Ephraimites within the inheritance of the Manassites. They did not dislodge the Canaanites living in Gezer. To this day, the Canaanites live among the people of Ephraim, but are required to do forced labor. So there you go. Chapters 9 to 16. Not that much. It's just a bunch of accounts of kings being just dogged on by Joshua in Israel. Awesome sauce. Really awesome sauce stuff. So, now we're going to do notes, I guess. Alright, so verse 1 through 6 of chapter 9. Now when all the kings of the Jordan heard about these things, the kings in the hill country and the western hills and along the entire coast of the Mediterranean seas as far as Lebanon, the king of the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, they came together to wage war against Joshua and Israel. However, when the people of Gibeon heard about what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they resorted to a ruse. They went as a delegation whose donkeys were loaded with worn-out sacks and old wineskins, cracked and mended. They put worn and patched sandals on their feet and wore old clothes, while the bread of their food supply was dry and moldy. Then they went to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal and said to him and the Israelites, "We have come from a distant country, make a treaty with us." So as the news about their victory became widespread, the Israelites experienced opposition in 2 forms. Direct, kings in the area began to unite against them, and indirect, the Gibeonites resorted to deception. We can expect similar opposition as we obey God's commands. To guard against these pressures, we must rely on God and communicate daily with Him. He will give us strength to endure that the direct and indirect pressures we face and wisdom to see through the deception. Verse 14 through 17 says, the Israelites sampled their provisions but did not inquire of the Lord. Then Joshua made a treaty of peace with them to let them live, and the leaders of the assembly ratified it by oath. 3 days after they made the treaty with the Gibeonites, the Israelites heard that they were neighbors living near them. So the Israelites set out, and on the third day came to the cities Gibeon, Kipharah, Beeroth, and Kiriath Jearim. So when the leaders sampled these men's provisions, they saw that the bread was dry and moldy. The wineskins were old and cracked, and the clothes and sandals were worn out. But they did not see through the deception because they failed to consult the Lord. After the promise had been made and the treaty ratified, the facts came out. Israel's leaders had been deceived. God had specifically instructed Israel to make no treaties with the inhabitants of Canaan. As a strategist, Joshua knew enough to talk to God before leading his troops into battle, but the peace treaty seemed innocent. So Joshua and the leaders made this decision on their own. By failing to seek God's guidance and rushing ahead with their own plans, they had to deal with angry people and an awkward alliance. Once again, they failed to go to they failed to go to God, and often we do the same. A new situation arises, and we forget to seek God's wisdom and guidance. When we learn the lessons of the past and apply them today, we save ourselves a lot of trouble. Verse 19 through 20 says, if I can find it. For all the leaders answered, we have given them our oath by the Lord, the God of Israel, and we cannot touch them now. This is what we will do to them. We will let them live, so that God's wrath will not fall on us for breaking the oath we swore to them. So Joshua and his advisors had made a mistake, but because they had given an oath to protect the Gibeonites, they would keep their word. The oath was not nullified by the Gibeonites' trickery. God had commanded the people to keep their oaths, and breaking an oath was taken seriously. This encourages us not to take our promises lightly and to check our alliances carefully. Chapter 10, verse 5 through 8 says, Then the 5 kings of the Amorites, the kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon, joined forces. They moved up with all their troops and took up position against Gibeon and attacked it. The Gibeonites then sent word to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal, Do not abandon your servants. Come up to us quickly and save us. Help us, because all the Amorite kings from the hill country have joined forces against us. So Joshua marched from Gilgal with his entire army, including all the best fighting men. The Lord said to Joshua, Do not be afraid of them. I have given them into your hand. Not one of them will be able to withstand you. The alliance of enemy kings from the south actually helped Joshua and his army because the enemies had united to attack Gibeon. Joshua didn't have to spend the time and resources required to wage separate campaigns against each fortified city represented in the coalition. Even though Joshua made a bad decision by making a treaty with the Gibeonites, God was faithful to his people and made a plan to give them success over the kings from the south anyway. Joshua's response shows his integrity. After having been deceived by the Gibeonites, Joshua and the leaders could have been slow about their attempt to rescue them. Instead, the Israelites immediately responded to their call for help. Even if you had promised to help someone, how quickly would you do if they had deceived you? You should take our word just as seriously as Joshua did. Verse 12 through 14 says, On the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel, Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and you, moon, over the valley of Al-Jalan. So the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, till the nation avenged itself on its enemies, as it is written in the book of Joshua. The sun stopped in the middle of the day and delayed going down about a full day. There has never been a day like it before or since, a day when the Lord listened to a human being. Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel. So, how did the sun stand still? Of course, in relation to the earth, the sun always stands still. The earth travels around the sun, but this was not meant to be a scientific description. After all, we are not confused when someone tells us the sun rises or sets. The point is that the day was prolonged, not that God used a particular method to prolong it. 2 explanations have been given for how this event occurred. A slowing of the Earth's normal rotation gave Joshua more time. Some unusual refraction of the sun's rays gave additional hours of light. Regardless of how God did this, the Bible is clear that the day was prolonged by a miracle, and that God's intervention turned the tide of battle for his people. The book of Joshua, also mentioned in 2 Samuel chapter 1, verse 18, was probably a collection of historical events put to music. Many parts of the Bible contain quotations from older books, songs, poems, and other spoken or written materials. Because God guided the writer of this book to select this material, his message came with divine authority. Verse 24 says, When they had brought these kings to Joshua, he summoned all the men of Israel and said to the army commanders who had come with him, Come here and put your feet on the necks of these kings. So they came forward and placed their feet on their necks. Placing a foot on the neck of a captive was a common military practice in the ancient Middle East. It symbolized the victor's domination of his captives. These proud kings had boasted of their power. Now all Israel could see that God was superior to any earthly army. Verse 25 says, Joshua said to them, Do not be afraid, do not be discouraged, be strong and courageous. This is what the Lord will do to all the enemies you are going to fight. With God's help, Israel won the battle against 5 Amorite armies. Such a triumph was part of God's daily business as he worked with his people for victory. Joshua told his men never to be afraid because God would give them similar victories over all the enemies. God has often protected us and won victories for us. The same God who empowered Joshua and who had led us in the past will help us. with our present and future needs. Reminding ourselves of his help in the past will give us hope for the struggles that lie ahead. Verse 32 of chapter 10 says, the Lord gave Lachish into Israel's hands, and Joshua took it on the second day. The city and everyone in it he put to the sword, just as he had done to Libnah. Notice that after every Israelite victory, the text gives the credit to the Lord. All of Israel's victories came from God. When we are successful, we may be tempted to take all the credit and glory as though we succeeded by ourselves, in our own strength. In reality, God gives us the victories, and he alone delivers us from our enemies. We should give him the credit and praise him for his goodness. Verse 40 through 43 says, So Joshua subdued the whole region, including the hill country, the Negev, the western foothills, and the mountain slopes, together with all the kings. He left no survivors. He totally destroyed all who gathered, just as the Lord, the God of Israel, had commanded. Joshua subdued them from Kadesh Barnea to Gaza, and from the whole region of Goshen to Gibeon. All these kings and their lands Joshua conquered in one campaign, because the Lord, the God of Israel, fought for Israel. Then Joshua returned with all Israel to the camp at Gilgal. So, God has commanded Joshua to take leadership in ridding the land of sin, so God's people could occupy it. Joshua did his part thoroughly, leading the united army to weaken the inhabitants. When God asks us to do something, we must not pause to debate. We need to consider the options, negotiate a compromise, or rationalize. Instead, like Joshua, our response must be swift and complete. No, we must not pause to debate, consider the options, negotiate a compromise, or rationalize instead. That's what I meant to say. Instead, like Joshua, our response must be swift and complete. Let us ruthlessly avoid relationships and activities that can keep us from hearing and heeding God's commands. Verse 1 through 5 of chapter 11 says, When Jabin, king of Hazor, heard of this, he sent word to Jobab, king of Madon, to the kings of Shimron and Akshaph, and to the northern kings who were in the mountains in the Arabah, south of Kinnereth, in the western foothills, and in Naphtali on the west, to the Canaanites, in the east and west, to the Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, and Jebusites in the hill country, and to the Hittites below Hermon in the region of Mizpah. They came out with all their troops and a large number of horses and chariots, a huge army as numerous as the sand on the seashore. All these kings joined forces and made camp together at the waters of Mirah to fight against Israel. 2 kings of Hazor were named Jabin. The other is mentioned in Judges chapter 4, verse 2. The Jabin of this story was quite powerful because he was able to build an alliance with dozens of kings. By all appearances, Jabin had a clear advantage over Joshua and his outnumbered forces. However, those who honor those who honor God can be victorious regardless of the odds. Verse 10 through 13 says, At that time Joshua turned back and captured Hazor and put its king to the sword. Hazor had been the head of all these kingdoms. Everyone in it they put to the sword. They totally destroyed them, not sparing anyone that breathed, and he burned Hazor itself. Joshua took all these royal cities and their kings and put them to the sword. He totally destroyed them, as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded them. Yet Israel did not burn any of the cities built on their mounds, except Hazor, which Joshua burned. So, victorious invaders usually kept captured cities intact, moving into them and making them centers of commerce and defense. We see this, for example, in Moses' prediction that the Israelites would occupy cities they themselves had not built. Joshua, however, burned Hazor as a former capital of the land. Hazor symbolized the wicked culture that Israel had come to destroy. In addition, its capture and destruction broke the backbone of the Federation and weakened the resistance of the people of Canaan. Verse 15 says, As the Lord commanded his servant Moses, so Moses commanded Joshua, and Joshua did it. He left nothing undone of all that the Lord commanded Moses. Joshua carefully obeyed all the instructions given by God. This theme of obedience is repeated frequently in the book of Joshua. Obedience is one aspect of life that each individual believer can control. We can't always control our perception of circumstances or events because we may not have all the facts. We can't control what other people do or how they treat us. We can, however, control our choice to obey God. Whatever new challenges we may face, the Bible contains relevant instructions that we can choose to ignore or choose to follow. Verse 18 says, Joshua waged war against all these kings for a long time. The conquest of much of the land of Canaan seems to have happened quickly. We can read about it in one sitting, but it actually took 7 years. We often expect quick changes in our lives and quick victories over sin, but our journey with God is a lifelong process, and the changes and victories may take time. We can grow impatient with God and feel like giving up hope because things are moving too slowly. When we are close to a situation, seeing progress is difficult, but when we look back, we can see that God has never stopped working. In verses 21 to 22, it says, At that time Joshua went and destroyed the Anakites from the hill country, from Hebron, Debir, and Anab, from all the hill country of Judah, and from all the hill country of Israel. Joshua totally destroyed them and their towns. No Anakites were left in Israelite territory, only in Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod did any survive. The Anakites were the tribes of giants the Israelite spies described when they gave their negative report on the Promised Land. This time, the people did not let the fear of the giants prevent them from engaging in battle and claiming the land God had promised them. So, Joshua chapter 12 is a summary of the first half of the book of Joshua. It lists the kings and people conquered by Joshua, both east and west of the Jordan River. As long as the Israelites trusted and obeyed God, one evil nation after another fell in defeat. Whenever we get to chapter 13, we see that chapters 13 to 19, which we haven't read. We haven't read 17, 18, and 19 yet, but we will next video. But chapters 13 to 19 anyway, are chapters describing how the Promised Land was to be divided among the 12 tribes. First, the tribe of Levi was not to have any land because they were to spend all their energy serving God and the people, not their own interest. Second, the tribes of Reuben and Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh had already received the land east of the Jordan River, which had been given to them by Moses. Third, the tribes of Judah and Joseph, Ephraim, and the other half-tribe of Manasseh had received land that the ancestor Jacob had promised them 450 years earlier. The rest of the tribes divided up the remaining land by casting sacred lots. Through Jacob's original blessing of his sons and Moses' blessing of the 12 tribes, the type of land each tribe would receive was already known. The two blessings were prophetic, for although Joshua cast lots to determine the land to be given to each of the remaining tribes, the allotments came out just as Jacob and Moses had predicted. Verse 1 of chapter 13 says, When Joshua had grown old, the Lord said to him, You are now very old, and there are still very large areas of land to be taken over. Joshua was getting old. He was between 85 and 100 years of age at this time. God, however, still had work for him to do. Our culture often glorifies the young and strong and sets aside those who are older. Yet older people are filled with the wisdom that comes with experience. They are very capable of serving it if given the change and should be encouraged to do so. Believers never retire from God's service. Those past retirement age should not assume that age disqualifies or excuses them from serving God. Verse 7 says, And divided as an inheritance among the 9 tribes and half of the tribe of Manasseh. Much of the land was unconquered at this point, but God's plan was to go ahead and include the land in the divisions among the tribes. God's desire was that it would eventually be conquered by the Israelites. God knows the future, and as he leads you, he already knows about the victory that lies ahead. But just as the Israelites still had to go to fight their battles, we also must face the trials and fight the battles of our unconquered lands, the spiritual ones. So what are our unconquered lands? This may be foreign countries in need of missionaries, new languages in which to translate the Bible, new neighbors who need to hear about Jesus, interest groups or institutions that should be doing redemptive work, unchallenged societal problems or ethical issues, unconfessed sin in our lives, or underdeveloped talents and resources. Whatever territory God has given us to conquer, we need to conquer. Conquering this territory will be your opportunity to remain faithful to God and do his will. Verse 13, chapter 13 says, But the Israelites did not drive out the people of Geshir and Makkah, so they continue to live among the Israelites to this day. One reason the Israelites encountered so many problems as they settled the land was that they failed to fully conquer the land and drive out all its inhabitants. The idolatrous influence of the remaining Canaanites caused unending difficulties for the Israelites, as the book of Judges records. Just as they struggled to remove completely the sinful people from the land, believers today struggle to appropriately deal with the sin in their lives, and it can lead to disastrous results. Jesus is the only one who can ultimately fix our sin problem, but as believers we can take steps to turn away from our sinful desires. One way to reshape our desires is to fill our hearts and minds with God's Word. Go reread the 10 Commandments in Exodus chapter 20. We need to ask ourselves, have I allowed sin to rule my actions or thoughts? Have I settled for mediocre attempts at repentance? Or do I condemn the faults of others but condone my own? Verse 15 to 23 says, this is what Moses had given to the tribe of Reuben according to its clans. The territory for Arieh on the rim of the Arnon Gorge, and from the town in the middle of the gorge and the whole plateau past Medeba to Heshvan and all its towns on the plateau, including Deban, Bamath Baal, Beth Baal Maon, Jahaz, Kedemoth, and Nephath, Kiriathim, Sibmah, Zeri, Zerath, Shahah, on the hill in the valley, Beth Peor, the slopes of Pisgah and Beth Jeshemoth, all the towns on the plateau, and the entire realm of Sihon, king of the Amorites, who ruled at Heshbon. Moses had defeated him and the Midianite chiefs, Evi, Rekem, Zerah, and Reba. Princes allied with Sihon, who lived in the country, in addition to those slain in battle, the Israelites had put to the sword Balaam, son of Beor, who practiced divination. The boundary of the Reubenites was the bank of the Jordan. These towns and their villages were the inheritance of the Reubenites according to their clans. Because of Joseph's godly character, the tribes descended from him. Ephraim and Manasseh were given the richest, most fertile land in all of Canaan. Judah, who offered himself in exchange for his brothers Benjamin's safety, received the largest portion of land, which eventually became the southern kingdom and the seat of David's dynasty. Reuben, who slept with one of his father's wives, was given desert land, the region described here that we just read about. The blessings Jacob gave to his sons according to their characters seem to be reflected in the characteristics of the land each tribe received. Verse 29 says, this is what Moses had given to the half-tribe of Manasseh, that is, to half the family of the descendants of Manasseh according to its clans. The tribe of Manasseh was divided into two half-tribes. This occurred when many people from the tribe wanted to settle east of the Jordan River in an area that was especially suited for their flocks. The rest of the tribe preferred to settle west of the Jordan River in the land of Canaan. Verse 33 says, but to the tribe of Levi Moses had given no inheritance, the Lord the God of Israel as their inheritance, as he promised him. The tribe of Levi was dedicated to serving God. The Levites needed more time and mobility than landowners could possibly have. Giving them land would mean saddling them with responsibilities and loyalties that would hinder their service to God. Instead, God arranged for the other tribes to meet the Levites' needs through donations. Verse 5 of chapter 14 says, so the Israelites divided land just as the Lord had commanded Moses. The land was divided exactly as God had instructed Moses years before. Joshua did not change a thing. He followed God's command precisely. Often we believe that almost is close enough, and this idea can carry over into our spiritual lives. For example, we may follow God's word as long as it feels easy, but ignore it when we do not want to do what God wants. But God is looking for people who will devote themselves completely to following his word and his will. Verse 6 and 12 says, now the people of Judah approached Joshua at Gilgal, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, said to him, you know what the Lord said to Moses, the man of God, at Kadesh Barnea about you and me. I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to explore the land, and I brought him back a report according to my convictions. But my fellow servants who went up with me made the hearts of the people melt in fear. I, however, followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. So on that day Moses swore to me, the land on which your feet have walked will be your inheritance, and that of your children forever, because you have followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. Now then, just as the Lord promised, he has kept me alive for 40 years since the time he said this to Moses, while Israel moved about in the wilderness. So here I am today, 85 years old. I am still as strong today as the day Moses sent me out. I'm just as vigorous to go out to battle now as I was then. Now give me this hill country that the Lord promised me that day. You yourself heard then that the Anakites were there, and their cities were large and fortified. But the Lord helping me, I will drive them out, just as he said. Caleb was faithful from the start, as one of the original scouts sent into the promised land. He had seen great cities and giants, and yet trusted that God would help the people conquer the land. Because of Caleb's faith, God promised him a personal inheritance of land. Here, 45 years later, the land was given to him. Caleb's faith was still unwavering, although his inherited land still had giants. Caleb knew the Lord would help him conquer them. Like Caleb, be faithful to God, not only at the start of your walk with him, but also through your entire life. Be careful not to rest on your past accomplishments or reputation. When Joshua gave Caleb his inheritance, it fulfilled a promise God had made to Caleb 45 years earlier. We expect such integrity and reliability from God. But do we expect the same from his followers? Can others expect it from you? Is your word this reliable? Would you honor a 45-year-old promise? God would and does. Even today, he is honoring promises he made thousands of years ago. In fact, some of his greatest promises have yet to be fulfilled. This gives us much to look forward to. Let your faith grow as you experience how God keeps his word. Verse 15 says, Hebron used to be called Kiriath Arba after Arba, who was the greatest man among the Anakites. Then the land had rest from war. The Anakites were a people marked by extraordinary height and strength who inhabited part of the land before Joshua's conquest. Because of their height, they were sometimes referred to as giants. So notice in chapter 15, verses 1 through 12, that these boundaries and descriptions of the promised land are very specific. God was telling the people of Israel exactly what to do, and he was giving them just what they needed. They had no excuse for disobedience. Verses 16 through 19 says, And Caleb said, I will give my daughter Aksah in marriage to the man who attacks and captures Kiriath Sephir. Othniel, son of Kenaz, Caleb's brother, took it, so Caleb gave his daughter Aksah to him in marriage. One day when she came to Othniel, she urged him to ask her father for a field. When she got off her donkey, Caleb asked her, What can I do for you? She replied, Do me a special favor, since you have given me land in the Negev. Give me also springs of water. So Caleb gave her the upper and lower springs. Othniel became Israel's first judge after Joshua's death. He played an important role in reforming Israel by chasing away an oppressive enemy army and bringing peace back to the land. Here we see Caleb's legacy of faithfulness continue to the next generation. Aksah asked Caleb for springs of water because her land was in the south and was very arid. Caleb probably granted her request as a wedding present. Verse 16, 1 through 4. Chapter 16, verses 1 through 4 says, The allotment for Joseph began at the Jordan, east of the springs of Jericho, and went up from there through this desert into the hill country of Bethel. It went on from Bethel, that is Luz, crossed over to the territory of the Arkites and Atarath, descended westward to the territory of the Jephthalites as far as the region of Lower Beth-horon, and on Giza, ending on the Mediterranean Sea. So Manasseh and Ephraim, the descendants of Joseph, received their inheritance. Although Joseph was one of Jacob's 12 sons, he did not have a tribe named after him. This was because Jacob took Joseph's sons Ephraim and Manasseh as his own, and their inheritance fulfilled the blessing Jacob had spoken over Joseph, and by extension his sons through his 2 sons. Joseph, as the oldest son of Jacob's wife Rachel, received a double portion of the inheritance, the largest territory and the greatest influence in the northern half of Israel belonging to their tribes. Verse 10 of chapter 16 says, They did not dislodge the Canaanites living in Gezer. To this day the Canaanites live among the people of Ephraim, but are required to do forced labor. Occasionally, the text says the Israelites did not drive out the people of the land. This was contrary to God's explicit desire and command. The failure to remove completely the pagan people and their gods from the land would cause many problems for the nations. The book of Judges records many of these struggles. So there we go. We are not having a video tomorrow, but hey, it's 12 a.m., so we practically had a video Wednesday. We usually don't do videos Wednesday, but since it's 12 a.m., here we go. Joshua video tomorrow. Let's pray. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Lord, I ask you that you give us strength, you give us victories over our spiritual battles, Lord. I ask that you keep the evil demons away and the evil spirits away. I ask that you keep us away from the evils of the conjoined flesh that tries to lie and deceive our spirit into sinning. I ask that you give us discernment and strength to overcome that deception from the devil, Lord, and that we can Romans 16:20 him, stomp on him with your power, Lord. I ask that you give us power over sin, Lord, that we can conquer it and defeat it with your sacrifice and with your forgiveness, Lord. I thank you for your sacrifice, Lord. I thank you for your giving of victories to us always, Lord, because even though we go through sufferings, even though we may be hurt in our lives, even though we are punished in lives, even though we are just hurt over and over, Lord, we have the ultimate victory in the end. Whether we have defeats in this world, we will have a victory in the new world to come, Lord. I thank you for everything. I ask that you give us strength and courage to conquer all evils, Lord. I ask that you can give us love, joy, peace, all the fruits of the Spirit, Lord, so that we can battle against sin, Lord. I thank you, and I pray all this in your name. Amen. So, good night. God bless. We love you all. See you Thursday.